Some of the big ones I've done, I've cycled around the world, rode across the Atlantic and walked across the empty quarter desert and across southern India as well.
The most recent one was a 63-day horse ride down the post roads of eastern Kazakhstan. I lived with a hunter in Tajikistan for 1 month. I ran 100 miles across a desert in the Kizilkum in Uzbekistan.
Dave Cornthwaite came to load up some magazines for me and offered me the position of the writer on his Swim 1000 expedition. So he was swimming the Lower Missouri and he wanted a support team to stand up paddleboard alongside him. And then I saw a tweet from Sean Conway about sort of 6 months after getting back, asking for a support crew for another ginger. All expenses paid for 2 months over the summer, and I applied, and luckily Dave gave me a good reference and I got the position of crew captain, which was exciting. So that took me up the length of Britain over 4.5 months this summer.
What drives me is personal ambition. I'm very hard on myself and I want to try and make the most of my life in terms of the experiences I have and the places I go, but also in terms of the books that I write and more recently the films I make, trying to do something really good and difficult with my life.
I kind of go on expeditions more for the determination of doing something and then sharing the stories afterwards. I take a particular thrill for me is telling people and doing talks and lectures about what it's like to live in Tajikistan or run across a desert in Uzbekistan or live with eagle hunters in Mongolia. Those are the moments where people go, oh wow, really? You did that? That's awesome. Those are the moments that I really enjoy, and I think those are the reasons that I continue doing it.
We're in a generation where careers are different. You don't just sort of make contacts and make your way up so simply. Everyone's much more restless and sort of it's much more complicated. Everyone needs more from life and wants to experience more, and I think that I think the suffering aspect and doing Ironman and big trips and stuff like that, I think it's personal challenges. People are realising how much they're sort of able to do, and even if you've never done something before, I mean, I'd never kayaked before and I kayaked a very long way, and I'd never paddleboarded before and I paddleboarded a very long way. So I think that people are so much more capable than they realise.
I used to think I was quite weird because I seem to like doing stuff that's really miserable, and I spend a lot of my time thinking, why am I doing this? And I used to think that was quite a strange way to behave, but I've learnt about type 2 fun. Well, type 1 fun is just the fun you're having right now, doing something fun. Type 2 fun is when you do something that's miserable and awful at the time, but is fun and worthwhile in hindsight. I always think actually on an expedition that if you're having too much type 1 fun, as in if you're enjoying it right now, then you're not actually on an expedition, you're on holiday. So you therefore need to do something a bit harder and a bit more miserable to turn it into type 2 fun. But I think that's pretty familiar to anyone who's gone camping in Scotland in the rain or cycled somewhere very far, very fast, getting very tired. All of these things, you're not enjoying it at the time, but you feel good afterwards and you feel proud for longer after that.
I think most of the time in my life is spent in type 2 fun, verging on type 3 fun, which is no fun at all. Yeah, there's something satisfying about pushing yourself to the furthest limits that you can achieve and then being proud and fun and enjoying it in retrospect that you actually had the determination and goal to go out and do it. We were horse riding through eastern Kazakhstan. Well, I say we were horse riding. The horses had a saddle sore. You can't ride a horse with a saddle sore, so we were having to walk 20 miles in 40-degree heat. We were down to our food intake consisted of gruel for breakfast, 1 dried packet of noodles shared between us, eaten raw, and then 2 packets of noodles for dinner. So we were down to about 800 calories a day with walking 20 miles with horses in 40-degree heat through an absolute baking sort of desert. So that would be me suffering on an expedition. With
the Missouri River, the trip was really fun. The weather was nice. Going down a river was a lot easier, especially when you're next to a swimmer. So it was quite slow-paced. The last 2 weeks were miserably cold, but even now looking back on it, I don't really remember it. I mean, the last day I actually threw up from being cold, and also sort of fainted from being cold. And I remember just feeling so cold that I've never experienced cold like that in my life. And still, looking back on it, you don't really remember that. I remember, you know, jumping off my board because it was so hot and, you know, that sort of thing. So definitely agree. And with Swimming Britain, I'd say it was even more so. Swimming Britain was definitely one of the toughest things I've ever done. Physically, mentally, just warmth-wise, it was really tough. Yeah, I think I'm quite stubborn and quite hard at coping with things, and I definitely had many times where I'd sit in the kayak for sort of, you know, 7 hours a day, sometimes 10 hours a day, just literally having to tell myself to just man up and keep going.
I spend a lot of my time on expeditions feeling quite close to giving up. I really like normal life. I like sitting on the sofa in front of the TV, drinking beer. So when I'm away on a trip feeling miserable, I think, why am I doing this? Why aren't I at home? But I'm also very, very stubborn to myself. And I realised a long time ago that the hardships and miseries are the things that later in life you look back on with the most fondness and the happiest memories. And so I've just really set myself a non-negotiable rule of giving up's not really an option, and I just stubbornly keep going on that despite being miserable.
Fear, I used to have a really big problem with fear. I used to be quite shy as a teenager. I used to be quite withdrawn. I didn't really used to speak to that many people. And I remember going on the first trip to Kyrgyzstan in 2010 when I was 21. And I remember wondering, like, well, where are we going to sleep that night? I was really like, where am we going to sleep for that first night when we get there in Kyrgyzstan? And that was really kind of a fear of the unknown. That I really felt quite unnerved by that. But the more you do the trips, the more you realise that everything's going to be all right in the end. You just know how to wing it.
Life now, you could very literally live your life behind a computer screen. You could have all of your engagements with people via the internet. You could visit the world via the internet. You could buy food in to feed you via the internet. You could spend your whole life behind a computer now. And there's a lot of wonderful aspects to that, but I think there's a bit of a yearning in people now to feel real life a bit more. And real life can take the form of whatever people like, so live music rather than listening to CDs, for example, or getting out there and getting freezing cold and wet and muddy at the weekend, just to really savour getting home to a hot bath and a warm bed. I think it just helps you feel a bit more alive.
I refuse to sort of just be moulded into this path and kind of not really be excited by life at all. And I think it's the excitement of, I mean, being, you know, going up the coast of Britain, seeing the entire coastline from the water and coming across deserted beaches and being anchored in these locks and, you know, things like that. It's so exciting to see that. I just don't get why you wouldn't want to. And I think being in emptiness and space and things as well, I just love that.
The best part of expeditions come in very single, isolated moments, and they're the moments that really make it. So for this horse ride, I spent the vast majority of my time suffering, either like physically, morally, wondering about my horses, all this sort of stuff. But then I went for a horse ride with the horse one evening, just me, and we galloped out across the western, like galloped into the setting sun through all the long grass, just absolutely pounding it at like 35 miles an hour, just me and one horse, and it was just into the setting sun like cowboys. And it was just that single instant was like, this is why I'm doing it. So it comes in just brief flickers of like just absolute sort of sunshine kind of moments.